Yeah, do you want to maybe just start by tell me a bit about your background and your career?
Okay, well, I grew up in a small town, St. Thomas, Ontario. Went to University of Western Ontario.
Hmm.
I was admitted with a scholarship in math, sciences, and language, and the UWO prize in physics and chemistry. I graduated in 1955 with an MD. I started in internal medicine for 2 years residency. Then I went into family practice for 9 years.
Hmm.
Following the 9 years, I went into a radiology residency, and I obtained my fellowship in diagnostic radiology and ultrasound in 1969. I started out with an appointment at Westminster Hospital, London, which was a veterans hospital. And I spent 4 years there. Then I went into solo private radiology practice, where I practiced for 20 years from
Wow.
1974 to 94. And then since that time, I've in my retirement, become a scientist.
Yeah, I
So
understand you have a lot of projects on the go at all times from what I
that,
hear.
that's right. It was basically were unfinished business in
Hmm.
my during my career, among which was uh, the contamination of drugs of all medical injections by rubber parts of syringes and rubber parts of the little rubber stoppers on ampoules of drugs, and in all three parts of the of intravenous uh, fluid administration sets. So this was a worldwide problem. The major part of this was it was very difficult to get this out so that people knew about it. When
Hmm.
I first started, when I encountered a cluster of reactions to my injections of dyes to show up the kidneys on and the excretory parts of the renal system on X-rays, I encountered a cluster of adverse reactions. Uh, People got hives and flushing, and I got one life-threatening anaphylactic shock reaction.
Wow.
Now, it was a cluster of reactions. So I changed to a different batch of the dye that I was injecting. And then that made no difference. So at that time, I read something in a medical publication about contamination of injections by particles. And they mentioned the exact syringe type that I was using. So I said,
Wow.
there's something to do with that. So I sent three different batches of my syringes that I was using, ones that I'd been using a month before, one that I was using during the reaction time, and an unopened
Hmm.
batch of another 50 or 100 syringes. I sent samples of each of those to the Bureau of Medical Devices in Ottawa, which checks uh, quality and problems with medical devices. Now, they took about a week to get back to me, and then I phoned them and they said that they had found a phenolic compound in it. Now, I said, a phenolic compound, is that the best you can do? He said, well, it's a phenolic compound that we discovered. And I tried to get more information out of them, but they refused to give me any more. So I called the editor of the Canadian Medical Association Journal, whom I knew, and
Mm.
that I had this batch of adverse reactions that were a cluster in an otherwise normal uh, group of injections that I'd been doing for 4 injections a day for months. I told them that they had found a phenolic compound. He says, "Well, send me a case report on it, and I'll look at it." Well, I sent him the case report, and he published it. He published it on
Well,
adverse reaction uh, to syringe rubber uh, phenolic compound.
sorry, Gavin, if I don't mean to interrupt, but since we have limited time, I was wondering if I could ask you a question.
Yep, you can do it anytime.
Thank you.
I know my stuff, so I can go. I can be interrupted at any stage. Go
Um,
ahead.
I'm just wondering how like ethics have like played a role over the course of your career. Like, can you speak to any kind of ethics that you have had to practice or
Well,
anything like that?
in my I didn't really encounter much because I practiced according to the books and
Hmm.
behaved normally. But I did have a patient come in and request. This was back in I guess the 1960s, early 1960s. Uh, Wanted me to perform an abortion on her. Now,
Oh well.
at that time, abortions were you'd lose your license and go to jail. Uh, Things became much easier after that, but I had to refuse to do that. I told her that if I did anything, I could at the risk of losing my license, and I ethically can't do it. So that was the only place I encountered that.
That's interesting. That is definitely an ethical dilemma.
That was it.
Helping
That
someone
was that.
versus
I didn't
the
encounter the
ramifica possible
dilemma because
ramifications.
I knew the rules,
Yeah.
and I knew I was not going to break those rules and risk my career
Hmm.
and jail time. So
Do you think you could speak to kind of what you hope people can learn and what they'll take away from your work and published articles?
okay, well I'll tell you about this episode with the phenolic compound. Uh, I had that article published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. And in the next issue, there was a scathing report from an allergist in London who said that I was reaching at straws and it was a crazy uh, idea that this was going on. And this made me angry, and I was trying to figure out what I could do. And right about the same time, I got a phone call from one of the editors of the journal Radiology, which is the top journal in my specialty in the world. And he asked me to write a similar article that I had published about the phenolic compound in the CMAJ,
Mm.
and that he would write a commentary alongside of it. So I did that. I took my time, wrote it, and submitted it to him, to the journal. And 3 months later, I got an airmail letter back, and that's the way it was in those days, saying that the editorial board had rejected my article.
Mm.
So uh, I was angry because I knew phenolic compound was not, there was far more to it than that.
Yeah.
So I phoned the Bureau of Medical Devices in Ottawa and demanded to speak to the uh, the I guess the one who runs it anyway.
Hmm.
And he said, well, he's on holiday, but I'll turn you over to another doctor. And I blasted him the same as I should about they have a state-of-the-art analytical laboratory, and all they would produce for me was a phenolic compound. I said, I've
Yeah.
got an editor of radiology that wants to know, and he will be calling you. He says, wait a minute, and in a few minutes, I'll get Dr. Uh, our scientist, an analyst, to call you. And uh, I was on the phone for a half an hour, and he listed or documented 8 different chemicals that they had found. And 3 of them were a group of chemical called benzothiazoles. And the particular one, after I researched the articles, the, uh, the, the, the chemicals that they listed, there was one in particular that was allergenic and toxic. And
Mm.
that was uh, MBT, mercaptobenzothiazole. They had withheld this to me from me. So with this information,
That's pretty unethical that they withheld it from you.
well, if this is a government Health Canada. So with this information, I then phoned the editor in charge of contrast agents at radiology, was Dr. Harry Fisher, and I explained to him what had happened. And he was angry. He
Mm.
said, you revise your article with the new information and send it to me here in my office, which was far removed from radiology office. So I did that, and that article was published with a commentary beside it by
Mm.
Harry Fisher, pointing out that this was a worldwide hazard. Now, I went back to my practice and I didn't want to use those rubber, it was from the rubber parts of the
Yeah.
syringe. I didn't want to use any of those syringes again, so I
Mm.
researched and found some Danish syringes, pharmaplast syringes that were all plastic. They weren't quite as good for when I was using it, but they had no MBT rubber in it. So I went back and I continued doing 4 of these injections a day. And then 3 months later, or 3 years later, I had another cluster of reactions.
Look, I
Same
could I
with an anaphylactic shock that's life-threatening. I said it must be the rubber parts of the little ampules that you use that I stick a needle in and take it. So I sent my 3 lots of my dye that I was using to the Bureau of Medical Devices.
mm,
But this time I sent it to two other. I told them this is going to 2 other government labs, and I want to know exactly what you find.
yeah.
They found the
Um,
very same 8 things in that, including the highly allergenic toxic MBT. So I wrote that up in the. This was in the Canadian Medical Association
mhm.
Journal. Well, a couple of years later, I combined both of them and wrote a letter to the editor to the Lancet. That's one of the top journals in the world. And it was a 1 page, under 1,000 word letter. And only one editor reads those and makes a decision on a letter whether to publish it.
Mhm.
I got by return email. I thought it was a rejection, but it was a return email from the Lancet that included the published letter that I had. They felt it was important enough that they fast tracked it into so in, instead of, if it had been gone through the system and more than one editor had looked at it, they would have rejected it because
Hmm.
the journals are owned by, or at least controlled, and many times are owned by the pharmaceutical industry. And
Yeah.
it's common knowledge that it's easy to get papers published when it's lauding the benefits of a drug, but it's
Hmm.
virtually impossible to get an article published that shows the bad sides of drugs. And these were bad.
Yeah.
This was this was
So, if I could just jump in, it sounds like I just want to explain a big portion of our class is about leadership and like more specifically ethical leadership. And it sounds like in your situation, leadership was really important. Like you had to have a lot of kind of passion and drive
well,
and
it was
leadership to
life and death.
pursue something like this.
Well, this was if anyone with any morals at all, this affected. I was in one little private office. I had two life-threatening reactions to my injections, and I was only injecting one substance.
Mm,
This was going on across the world,
yeah.
and not only that, I was only dealing with allergy to the drug, to the MBT. It was also toxic. And the World Health Organization uh, reviewed a book that I wrote on the sick kids, the Toronto Hospital for Sick Children with Cardiac
Yeah.
Deaths in 1980 to 81. They were classified as murder by digoxin because they had found high digoxin levels on an autopsy of one of the babies, and immediately they jumped to say that this was murder by digoxin. Normally,
Hmm.
you say that's a laboratory error or some other non-criminal reason for that, but it went right to start an murder investigation. Well, this went on for 2 years, and then 4 years before it sort of died down a bit with the Grange Inquiry report. It was a Royal Commission of Inquiry because of over 20 deaths on the cardiac
Hmm.
wards at a major uh, pediatric hospital in the world. So a nurse was charged with serial murder,
Yeah.
Susan Nellis.
Hmm.
This common knowledge for people of that era. You're you're too young, but your father has told you about this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that I know that that trial was a big deal and that
Yeah, well, in
you played a
about
big part in.
4 years after that episode, it was 1987. Uh, I encountered an article showing that this particular MBT was measured as digoxin.
Mm,
It was a drug testing, uh, U.S. Center for Drug Analysis in the U.S. were analyzing prepackaged unit dose syringes, which had a factory measured, carefully measured doses of digoxin, and they found that the digoxin levels were far higher than when they used testing by what they call the RIA, radioimmunoassay test. Now, that was the same test that was used in the Toronto cardiac deaths that assigned the murders, deaths as murder by digoxin. So that got me uh, r- investigating that. And I found out at the same time as the Toronto baby deaths in 1980 at Hammersmith Hospital, a teaching hospital in London, England, they found 91 babies with potentially toxic levels of MBT in their blood.
Wow.
Now,
So,
if you had tested those babies for digoxin using the RIA test method that was used to call these deaths murder, you would
mm,
have found that those 91 babies, again, on one single ward, taking only one single injection a day, this
wow.
built, it's a what they call a cumulative toxin. It, with each subsequent injection, it builds up a little bit more. So even
Hmm.
with one injection a day, 91 babies had potentially toxic levels of MBT. Now,
Wow.
uh,
So, yeah,
the baby, okay, go ahead. You ask a
yeah,
question.
yeah. Apologies, Gavin. I just we're running short on time here. I just wanted to ask you more about I guess ethics in general. Like for you in your situation, like the ethical choice was very clear. You know, you were obligated to pursue this and to study and to show the world that this woman was innocent and that it was actually the fault of these syringes and not her. But in all your years, and I understand you have a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience. Do you have any advice on just doing the right thing in general, and maybe for people who suffer harder ethical dilemmas, how to make the right choice as a leader in those situations?
My feeling is that when you find something that is wrong, particularly this is a worldwide problem. Now,
Mm.
anyone and everyone who encountered this should follow this up and bend over back. This is, I'm 95 years of age. I'm still trying to get this out there because doctors now have no idea that there ever was toxicity problem. And there still is because I wrote two letters to the editor to Military Medicine magazine. Now, the military does an awful lot of immunization because they're in tropical countries and exposed to all manner of illnesses. So they get a lot of immunization vaccines and they encounter serious reactions
Mhm.
and deaths.
Just more like maybe not necessarily like tied to your own life, but I wonder if you have like advice just about making the right choice in general and like what it takes to kind of be a good leader in a field. What
Well,
does like a good leader look like?
I, well, it's morality and what is right. Uh,
Mm.
I had no problem in pursuing this because it was morally correct and it is immoral to the point of being evil. What's going on with drug companies? They're still producing syringes and ampoules, drug ampoules, not as many by far, but they're still producing them because it's cheaper to make them with natural rubber with MBT than to go to the expense of creating a new product that's
Yeah.
safe. Now, the big difference is 1980, that was the just before around the beginning of the baby deaths at Toronto, a Japanese syringe manufacturer, Terumo, their syringes were found to be associated with the death of laboratory human cells in culture. Human cells in culture, not people, human cells in culture.
Mm.
They felt ashamed. You know, Japanese lose face. They were ashamed that their product, which was the best they could produce, was associated with the death across the world in laboratories. They knew it was toxic, so it couldn't be good for. So they went on a fast track to try to find a substitute for the rubber, a synthetic rubber that was safe. And they did that by 1986. And Japan legislated that all drugs, all injections must not come in contact with natural rubbers, MBT. They must use this new compound that Terumo and the Japanese government uh, managed to create. This did not happen in North America. They did everything they could to suppress the fact that this ever exists so that
Wow.
doctors have no idea. They know that patients die maybe in a big city, one or two a day from a big city would die in the dentist chair from a local anesthetic. They blame the local anesthetic. Well, the local anesthetic doesn't have any allergenic properties, but
Yeah.
the rubber in the syringe and the rubber in the the ampules that they used to draw the was the what was causing the allergic reactions and deaths.
Like we're
Same
we're
thing
we're
happens. The same thing, deaths from immune vaccines. Now
hmm.
get back to Japan. This is a very
Look, I'm sorry, Gavin, we're really just about out of time here.
yep.
Um,
Well, you can cut things out, but this is important.
I
You're not
understand.
running
Please
out of
continue.
tape, are you? This is important. Japan, like I told you, legislated that there be no MBT rubber used
Hmm.
in any of their products, and they legislated that all vaccines had to be made in Japan with the seal rubbers, the synthetic rubber seals. Well, they dropped their guard in around 2000 and allowed foreign-made whooping cough
Hmm.
vaccine by Sanofi Pasteur to enter the country. After 4 deaths, that vaccine was removed from the market.
Well,
Sanofi Pasteur HIB, it's whooping cough vaccine, was on a list of Health Canada, or I guess it was FDA list of drugs that were in contact with natural rubber.
mhm.
That was what killed the babies. Japan did not identify the cause. They said it was not the vaccine. It was a contaminant. Now,
Hmm.
you and I know what the contaminant was.
Yeah.
They knew, but the pharmaceutical industry managed to suppress that. So virtually no one knows that. See, that was just only one injection, one type of injection.
Yeah.
And there's
Wow.
thousands of injections around the world that people have developed allergic reactions, anaphylactic reactions, and have died.
It really shows how much corporations,
This is
put image
ethics.
and money over like
It's
public health.
ethics. They used to control medical journals because of
Hmm.
drug advertising was the major source of their income, and
Yeah.
they have a lot of slush funds to spend, so they spend a lot of it. But then they started buying mag uh, journals. The New England Journal was operating at bare, barely making ends meet,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden they divided up into multiple journals, multiple subjects, and all of them beautiful new magazines, but not owned by the previous. You'll find that there's a numbered company that owns them.
Hmm.
And there was one of the New England Journal editors who rebelled against this uh, journals for profit and the control that was exercised by the drug companies. And he wrote a book
She was a
talking
whistleblower.
about On the Take. His name is Caceres or something like that. But he was a and he exposed this, but
Well,
people still don't know.
mm,
You don't know. My doctor doesn't know about MBT. No one does because it's taboo in the
yeah.
medical journals.
Look, but before I'm just about out of time here because my mom's kicking me out. But I wanted to ask you, first of all, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Oh
It's
no,
honestly
this is
really interesting as well.
yeah.
Just
Anyway,
your life's work is it's so intricate and complicated and full of drama. And
yeah.
I'm
Well,
just wondering
it
if you,
has been, but it's
yeah,
been suppressed drama.
yeah.
Anyway,
Do you have any advice for young people like myself who may be going into research or business fields where they're expected to make good ethical decisions and be leaders that can be looked up to?
well, all I can say is very difficult. The business world has always been for profit,
Hmm.
and the pharmaceutical industry has been for profit uh, without paying attention to the deaths and illnesses that they cause. Uh, so it's hard for me to advise people because if you're in the academic world, I was in a private office. I was sort of insulated from the pressures of academia, but you could
Hmm.
lose your job.
Yeah.
There's a Nancy Olivieri at the Toronto Hospital for Sick Children lost her job because she went against the pharmaceutical industry
Hmm.
and wrote a paper on the bad effects of a, a drug that was used for treating sickle cell anemia. She was a world specialist. She was fired
Mm.
by the Toronto Hospital for Sick Children. That particular drug company had just offered to make the biggest contribution in the history of the U of T. And that was the company that pressured the the powers to be at the University of Toronto and Hospital for Sick Children and got her fired. The academic community rose up in arms and insisted that she be rehired. Well, she was rehired, but she was rehired by the University of Toronto, not the Hospital for Sick Children. And regardless of what is said, her career was stifled because of outside pressure that kept her from advancing.
Mm.
And she would not be invited to talk at conferences, all kinds of things. So,
Yeah.
so if you're when you advise someone, you sometimes advise them you have to think of your job, as well as, and you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to. That should be uh, the first do no harm. That's one of the
Mm.
bywords of medicine. Uh, anyway, it's hard to advise because you just can't advance in academia in medicine without kissing the asses of the pharmaceutical companies and looking aside at things that are obviously bad.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Gavin. I
You're
really appreciate
welcome.
it.